Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Mason Winfield of Spirit Way Project. I'm one of the co-founders with my dear friend Mike Bastine, who is my co-founder of Spirit Way Project. Mike, you want to tell him, say a little hi?
Sure. Hi, and thank you for tuning in. We're going to have a little conversation about crystal skulls.
Oh, yeah, we are. I have been curious for a long time about the fabled crystal skulls. And you hear a lot of stuff about them. You hear wild legends about their power, their origins. You hear crashing scorn coming from some of the establishment thinkers. But just so you know what we're talking about, there are a number of crystal skulls all over the world. Most of them are made in Mesoamerica because the skull is a very big symbol to the Aztec, the Toltec, the Maya, and their descendants today still really, they just love the human skull. And they use it for a lot of their ceremonies, including Christian ones like Day of the Dead, what do they call it? Dia de los Muertos or something. But these crystal skulls are not really what we're talking about. I mean, they'll have crystal skulls that are that big, and they'll have some that are that big, and they're not all made out of the purest crystal anyway. They're objects that are recently made, and there's no mystery about them at all. And there's no power associated with them. There's no legend, nothing. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the legend of the crystal skulls. And I have most often heard that the number of the original power totems was 13. I've heard legends that these things could have been made in Atlantis. They could have been made in ancient Mesoamerica. They could have been made somewhere else in the world. They could have been made in one of the star systems. Nobody knows. But Mike is an elder. He's a young one, but Mike is an elder. He is an Algonquin. But in these days, the native people, they travel all over the world and they get to know each other really well. And Mike has conferred deeply with elders from the Amazon, from the Andes, from Central America, Mesoamerica, from the American Southwest. I mean, Mike is in touch with some pretty powerful people, and he sounded them out about a lot of stuff. And so tonight, maybe I'll get to ask Mike a few questions about the crystal skulls. First of all, Mike, I'd like to narrow this down a little bit and talk about what we mean when we say the original crystal skulls, one of the original legendary group that all the stories are about, like the one with the detachable jaw.
Well,
Skull of Doom.
The one that I'm a little bit more familiar with is the one that they refer to as Max. And when they've studied Max, they can't see any microscopic abrasions. It's almost as if the crystal was poured into a form into the shape of a crystal skull.
Now, is that the one Anna Mitchell had, the one with the detachable jaw?
I believe it is that same one. And it's been referred to as Max. But
Skull of Doom, they call it a lot too.
Well, the skulls have many, I guess people have their own influence or their own ideas of what those skulls are for or how they were used. I don't know if anybody really understands that those skulls have a much greater or higher purpose, and they will come back together. And that is another part of what's coming in the future, is that when those skulls come back together with the right people, using them for ceremonial purpose, it's again another part of this thing called the Great Purification.
How many are original power totems?
They claim, as you have said, 13.
Okay, so that's on the level. And most of the elders that you've talked to agree that probably 13.
Is correct.
Okay.
And there's a reason for 13.
Huh.
If we use the lunar calendar, there are 13 months in a year.
Huh.
So there would be one skull for each zodiac, one each representing the cosmos of how the earth functions within a 13 moon or 13 month calendar.
Huh. Well, 13 is a big number around the rest of the world, at least for the Christians. I mean, you had Jesus being the outsider, and then you had the 12 apostles. But do you think, how many of the original 13, the power totems, how many do you think we have known now? Is Max the only one?
No, there's a number of them. I don't
really?
know the exact number.
Okay. But not all of them, right?
No, they're not all being represented, or they're not all known at this time. There was a man, his last name Shapiro.
He's done some writing and speaking.
He interviewed me and Ted some years ago about the
Dynamic
crystal
duo.
skulls. Yeah. But it's a collective, and that's what we need to do. Is the efforts that were used by discovering nations around the world really damaged. They really interfered with the cultures that were not only functioning, but using these elements to maintain what they would refer to as some status quo, to kind of keep the energies in check. They're no longer in check.
They've been moved from their original spots.
Yes. And they interacted with our weather.
Huh.
So you can see now why you can't pinpoint one component to say this is what's causing the shift or changes in our weather. But that is one contributing factor.
Yeah, everything big has multiple causes. Where do you think the skulls, or where do the elders suggest that the skulls may have been made?
Some they do know there were people in South America that were very proficient at producing the skulls. Were they all made there? I don't think so. I think there were varying groups, and this is what's really interesting about the Earth history, is that things seem to occur, but without a direct communication. They started noticing images being drawn on cave walls around the same time around the whole Earth. So sometimes the images were spiral, but they were things that they wanted to know, and they still want to know. How is it that this information can be picked up in another part of the world by another group of people, and they start doing exactly what started in another part? And I guess the best example is they reference this thing called the 100th monkey, which was done in the islands of Japan.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Without even representing an example of behavior, they had put food in the sand for these monkeys that like the water, and the monkeys wouldn't eat the food because it had sand on it. The one island, the monkeys started washing the food and eating it. So they went to another island, similar species of monkeys. They put the food in the sand. There were no trials. The monkeys just went and picked the food up and washed it in the water and then ate it.
Animal ESP has been very well proven. And I think that's just one shining example.
So the humans have this same ability.
Yeah, I think we do.
Unfortunately, the system has taken that away from them.
Now, Mike, I've heard among museum directors who don't happen to be Native American and they don't happen to be exactly superstitious, I've heard that there's some legends among people who work in museums that when there's a delivery of a crystal skull coming, I know there's one in London. I believe there's one in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian. And even if they don't believe that they're ancient objects, that they may have been recently made, they'll say to each other things like, don't look it in the eye, things like that. And the crystal skulls, at least some of them, are said to have power.
I believe they all have power.
Every single one of them? Even the ones that...
Yes, even the small ones that, because they're represented a part of a group which contain and are used for, again, the 13 skulls are representing each one of the zodiacs.
There's like 13 million of those little things.
But each one, and here's what I would suspect. Whenever the skull was produced, during that time period, it may be when it was started or when it was finished, then it falls into that representative because of the cosmos alignments that the earth is subject to. So that's how they represent themselves.
And it is crystal.
It is crystal.
And crystals are widely reputed to have power. It might simply be reflecting the power of the original object just through its shape and material.
And I believe all of them contain whatever representation of the zodiac that they were, when they were being produced, is what they fall into, that element. So when the ceremonies are being used, those skulls they would perform the ceremony during the time of the zodiac that skull was made in. So this is how they align things. It's really, it's not very complex, but on the same token, it is very complex.
Well, getting the answer to something, every answer is simple once you know it, I was going to ask you, had you ever heard the story that these skulls might have been made in Atlantis?
Yeah. And I wouldn't doubt at all that more than one would have been produced there. Because Atlantis, prior to its destruction, it housed a number of cultures. In fact, the Hopi are what Mad Bear had said. The Hopi were one of the cultures that migrated prior to the destruction or the sinking of Atlantis, that they were warned that they should leave. And this man, Gordon Michael Scallion, said 3 of the other cultures that migrated before it collapsed were the ones responsible for producing and building the pyramids in Egypt. That it was a collaborative effort. There was 3 cultures that actually came together and produced those pyramids.
So the Atlantis theory is at least possible in your mind.
Yes.
I was going to ask you, so a number of the skulls are hidden, the power ones, the 13, a number of the 13 are hidden.
I believe they...
I'm not asking you where. They're hidden,
I
right?
believe they hide themselves.
Oh.
That they have the ability to direct where they want to go or to be.
So the skull, the Mitchell Hedges skull, the one you and a bunch of the guys used to just go up to see Anna Mitchell Hedges. She lived up in what, Stratford, Ontario?
Yeah.
Didn't you go up
I
to see
didn't
her once in a
go
while?
to go visit, but I talked with a lot of people who did.
Yeah.
And, when things that are sacred are treated and held in a sacred manner, that's when they're at their best. That's when they're in their, I guess the best way to try to relate it, they're at their most content or happy state. So they're being recognized and treated in that sacred manner, and they're being taken care of. So when I was gifted a small crystal skull,
Hmm.
and I didn't bring it with me, but it sits in the window to greet the sun every morning.
It told you it didn't want to come.
Well, I was told it needed a name,
Yeah.
and at the time, for lack of a better name, I named it Mad Bear,
Oh.
because he was the greatest influence.
Mad Bear was Mike's tutor. Mad Bear was a very influential Tuscarora leader. And the Tuscarora are an Iroquoian nation. Take you about an hour to get to where he lived, right? Up
Yeah,
on Tuscarora, yeah. They live in the Tuscarora Reservation is in Niagara County near Lewiston. And Mike really got he was your mentor.
He was, but I really consider him the best friend that I ever had, because I viewed myself as a poop boy. You split the wood, you do dishes, but you're there providing a service, but you're also given an opportunity to observe things that you can't observe in a classroom. You can't, it's
Yeah.
under real life situations, and there's nothing staged or artificial about it. So you get to see everything as it unfolds and how it works. And it was the most amazing 7 or 8 years that I had an opportunity to experience.
We'll do a whole talk, or maybe several, about Mad Bear someday. Had you ever heard? So I heard, Mike, that something was found. Recently. It would have been in the 1990s, maybe the 1980s. Something was found at Ganondagan, which is the preserved Iroquoian community, preserved Seneca community, not too far from Rochester. There's some scuttlebutt going around the upstate that something crystal and potentially very important was unearthed at Ganondagan sometime within recent memory. Do you know anything about that? Or, don't tell me if it's private, but do you know anything about that?
I don't know any really detail that I can relate to, but I did hear that you hear things all the time that something was discovered or there's rumor of, and unless you can get the actual people that will confide and be able to assist, because this information, it is important, but again, on the same hand, I have to recognize my limitations, and to try to find all of these phenomena or elements that are in what they may call paranormal. um, you can't. It's not humanly possible for one individual to research and study or find. But it doesn't mean that I give up. I have to know my limitations too. So I don't pursue a lot of that unless it sounds like there's something of significance that might fit into what we need to gather the people together to perform the ceremonies, which are going to need to be done.
I can see we're going to need to revisit this subject. Mike, I'd like to ask you one last question. If I had one of the original Power 13 skulls, and I think they would have detachable jaws. I think the solid ones we've got in museums, they don't look much like the Mitchell Hedges skull, but that's just my opinion. But let's just hypothetically say that I had one of those things and I knew how to activate it, and I knew what could you do with it?
Again, individually, there's quite a bit. You can use it for healing. You can use it for retrieving information. but collectively is how they're supposed to
Okay.
be used. So again, yes, there's people who think that they would like to obtain one, but I would caution them to say there's a lot of work involved with how to take care of them, and there's a lot of work involved with keeping it so that the energy within them can be, in a sense, can also be harmful if people don't know how to
Oh, yeah.
work with that. So there's both sides or both ends of the spectrum, which people need to be careful with.
Oh, I got so many questions, but we better ring off for the evening. Mike, thanks so much for helping us out tonight, answering some questions, and
You're welcome.
thanks for being my co-founder in Spirit Way Project. It wouldn't have happened without you. So,
Okay,
hey,
well,
brother.
thank you, and
Good
have a
night.
good evening.